Our final talk in this session is actually from two people, both associated with Earthcube. We'll first hear from Rachel Black and then Don Middleton. So, thank you.
All right, hi everyone. So my name's Rachel Black and I am a project coordinator on the Earthcube test governance project. So to start out, always the first question, what is Earthcube? Earthcube is a community-driven project supported by the National Science Foundation's Geosciences Directorate, and the goal is to develop community-supported cyber infrastructure for the geosciences. So this is, ultimately the goal is to design, build, and maintain an easy-to-use system based on existing resources as well as newly developed resources to support the work of people across the geosciences. Earthcube, the journey, it's been plugging along for quite a few years now. So it started in 2011 with a Dear Colleague letter and a series of community meetings sponsored by the NSF, and these were sort of developing the concept of what is needed by these communities. Those first meetings were followed by a series of white papers and expressions of interest. These were ideas for roadmaps and designs for where this project could go. Following that, there was also a series of end-user workshops and a process of stakeholder alignment. Joel, who presented yesterday, worked with us on the stakeholder alignment portion. And this was really to go out to the community and really do intensive sessions asking what the community really needed and what the end-user scientists wanted from these projects. And then this is bringing us almost up to date. We have currently a series of, there was a first round of an NSF solicitation put out for a series of building blocks, which are, or a series, or all the Earthcube Awards, which is a series, they're research coordination networks, which are designed to do community building exemplars in the geosciences. There's a series of building blocks, which are developing initial software components, as well as two conceptual design awards that are funded to basically do broad architecture design white papers. So what could the architecture of Earthcube look like? And finally, there's the award that I'm on, which is the Test Governance Award, and we are tasked with designing a facilitating collaboration on a community-developed governance structure to carry all of this forward. So for the past, starting with the end-user workshops in the past like 6 or so months that I've been on this project, we've been doing a large sort of information gathering project, and that started with the end-user workshops, and we had people from across all sorts of different domains across the earth sciences, and all of these workshops came together and they were tasked with coming up from these domains, deciding on the science challenges and technical challenges that were facing their field. So from the science challenges, what these are, they were asked what are the science questions that they wanted to answer. And so just broadly, these are some of the themes that came out of here were that people wanted multidisciplinary science to further understand the environment. They needed to understand and adapt to or propose changes in their scientific approaches. They were also looking for things like communication. They needed better ways to communicate their science data in order to meet these grand challenge science questions. In addition to that, these end-user workshops were asked about what are the technical challenges that are the barriers to why they can't answer these larger science questions. And overwhelmingly, that was data. That's the major challenge. But when you dig into that deeper, it's a lot of nuance to that. There's issues with search and access or lack of awareness of the existing tools that are available. There's lots of issues with storage and lacks of domain-specific databases or insufficient domain-specific databases. In addition, there's issues with tools. People needed better tools for working with their data. And just across the board, lots of problems with sustainability. Again, we heard this in some sessions yesterday, issues with archiving, and there's all these mandates of you have to preserve your data and make it available, but just where do you do that? Where do you put it? There's also major issues with sort of cultural issues, and those are, what are the incentives for actually sharing your data? What do you get out of it? How does it help you in your career? So that's one set of the information that we were. I'm going to skip over a few things. So that was the first part of our information gathering phase, which was really what do the end users need from a system like Earthcube? What are the gaps? What can we step up to do? In addition to those workshops, we hosted a series of stakeholder workshops, and these have been just since January. We identified 6 different stakeholder groups and held workshops with them across 4 different venues. And these were, again, to gather more input from kind of a different perspective of what specifically does governance need to do to support the work of developing Earthcube going forward. From each of these workshops, and Don will talk a bit more about the data facilities, which was our first one specifically. So from each of these workshops we had, from the first one, we had a definition of what is a data facility in the context of Earthcube. What are the challenges facing these facilities? And again, Don will talk more about that one. The next one that we had was the Earthcube Portfolio Workshop, and that was all of the funded projects. And these were what we hoped to get out of this was what the Earthcube funded projects needed to have from governance to really become to integrate better, because these projects are funded to do their project, but they need to collaborate with each other in order to advance Earthcube forward. And so out of that, we had sort of a set of guidelines for collaboration that can be then given to NSF as a recommendation for how they could better help write these solicitations to actually have line items to help promote collaboration across Earthcube projects. In addition to that, we also reached out to the information technology and free and open source software communities, what we were kind of thinking of as the sort of connectors for all these different elements, not quite the end user geoscientists, but they are building tools that the geoscientists need to advance their work and advance their work with their data. And so this came out, the suggestion for this is that Earthcube governance needs some sort of technical advisory council to help shape the direction of where how to develop the technical aspects of Earthcube for the future. And then we also had, again, we brought back together many representatives of the end user communities of the previous workshops that we had, as well as representatives from different professional societies that have stakes in Earthcube. And from this one, we were hoping to, again, help develop a shared vision of success for academic geoscientists and how Earthcube governance can support that. And from that, again, we had suggestions for more different sort of advisory groups to how to engage the geoscience community, how to engage different parallel efforts that were supported. Then finally, wrapping this all up, we had a final workshop where we brought together representatives from all of these previous assembly workshops, the champions from these workshops, and gave them the seemingly impossible mission of bootstrapping a proposal for governance model out of this. Just moving forward. So that to get to that actual, like, coming up with a governance model, we had really 3 major goals that we wanted consensus on. The first was really digging deep into what are the functions of Earthcube governance? What does governance need to do to make this vision of a collaborative cyber infrastructure for the geosciences successful? From there, we went into developing the suggestions for the major components of a governance structure. And then finally, a sort of consensus on how does this structure then map back to these functions. Just briefly, we had about 20 critical functions that Earthcube governance needs to meet across 3 broad categories of leadership and vision, guiding the technical implementation, as well as advocacy and engagement in the geoscience and other communities. So now getting into the real meat of this is what we came up with as a structure. There's also an accompanying charter that goes with this. So you can see we have these 2 funding teams. These kind of help these are where the funded projects fit. They're kind of how these projects will help guide the technical implementation and the science direction of Earthcube. In addition to that, a series of working groups recognizing that a lot of the work that can be beneficial to working group to Earthcube might not necessarily come from a funded project, and so allowing for other people to contribute in a meaningful way. In addition to that, there's this partnership program idea, and this is kind of where initiatives like the NDS and ESIP and other federal agencies can fit in, because we do understand that people have been doing a lot of work, and we need to leverage that work and engage with communities like the NDS on how we can collaborate to help realize that we're going to have a lot of people who are crossing borders in these, and they have finite amounts of their time. And then there's these other committees these are things that came out of the Enduser workshops. This is where the sort of ideas for the technical advisory councils and the advocacy and engagement councils, again, the partnership programs, and then again, the Council of Data Facilities, which Don will talk about here in just a second. So just going to fly through this to give Don his time. So this is just an overview of where we've been. We had our information gathering and our stakeholder alignment period. We are coming up to our point where we have now had this charter out for about a month. We have been gathering feedback. We are going to present it in about another week here at our all hands meeting to get one more round of feedback and do a series of exercises to test some of the critical functions and some of the sort of sticky points that we see might cause issues in this charter, and see if we need to check and adjust things as necessary before we submit it as a formal recommendation to NSF. We will then wait, and if NSF likes what they see, hopefully they will give us the green light to go ahead and test it in year 2. And for year 2, we will actually test it as a working governance model. We'll populate the committees, we'll populate the steering committees, and really run it as sort of a beta test for governance. And then again, evaluate the results on a long-term for sustainability on a long-term basis. And pending that, hopefully there will be a solicitation and Earthcube will be moving on forward. And there's more information I'd be happy to talk to people about, but now I'm going to turn it over to Don, and he's going to talk about the data facilities workshops.
Fine overview, Rachel. I got to say that the folks at the Arizona Geological Survey are some of the hardest working people I've run into. 27 workshops and a lot of other stuff. Pretty amazing. This is a photo of the Earthcube Data Facilities Workshop. It was in January. It was in Arlington. It was pretty well attended. I think somebody else can correct, but I think upwards of 80 people or so, including a good number of NSF program directors who were interested in the whole thing. It was an outgrowth of a breakout group that happened at an earlier Earthcube Enduser workshop. And we had a breakout group that Mohan Ramamurthy and Kirsten Linhart of Lamont Doherty and myself were in. And we had some pretty good agreement that we needed to engage the data facilities, existing NSF GEO-funded data facilities, as a foundation. So at the workshop on data facilities, the one in Arlington, initially when we polled the group, about a third of the people thought that this was a good idea to somehow mobilize or form a council of the data facilities, and not uncoincidentally, all the people with data facilities were probably composing most of that third. And so there was some controversy over all of this, and I would say, summarizing all of that, is that there were a lot of concerns that the existing data facilities that were funded and sometimes large would have too much influence on the whole thing. And it might drive business as usual rather than innovation. On the flip side, others felt that this was such a great idea that it transcended Earthcube and it ought to be an independent thing all on its own, or maybe be at the very high level of Earthcube management and steering. So we had controversy on that. Mohan, Kirsten, Joel, and myself led another breakout group, which got a number of people into it, and we developed consensus and proposed a CDF, and that kind of overloaded with net CDF, and Mohan was in the group, but he was cool with that. It worked out okay. So we got some consensus, and then in the end, in the plenary, we ended up having a second vote on it, which got a thumbs up from the group after a lot of discussion over these controversial areas. And as you'll noted from Rachel's slide, is that this CDF ended up reporting as part of the major groups as reporting to the top level management, not being part of it. And then we had, I believe, Joel, correct me if I'm wrong, a third round of votes late in the day. More concerns were expressed. We had another round of votes. Everybody said it was a good idea, or the majority said it was a good idea. Ultimately, the formation of the CDF, I think, was very well received by the governance, and it was very well received by NSF. And funds were allocated to support its development right away. I heard words like, "This is very exciting. We're delighted that this has happened. It's a major development, major positive development." So the initial steering committee, which once again is the same people I've mentioned before, proceeded to, with Joel's help, we developed a draft charter for the CDF. This happened pretty quick. And that draft charter has been put out for comment in advance of the all-hands meeting. This is a copy of it. It's 5 pages plus about 3 or 4 lines currently. We need to update it some. We've got a lot more people on it than we did before. I'm going to really briefly go through, and Joel presented this outline of the document in the governance breakout session yesterday. So this is basically the major components of the CDF Draft Charter that's out there on the street right now. I'm not going to read through all of those, but you can get the basic idea. The idea was to cover the important bases, get it out to the community, get some feedback, put it into action, refine it as necessary. Now, I'm not going to read this. This is pulled directly out of the document, so I'm not going to read these. But in the preamble, the second sentence is really probably one of the most important ones, and that's basically saying that all these data facilities need to interact in a very productive way with all these other parts that Rachel mentioned, which are building blocks and RCNs and conceptual design awards and the community workshops and the needs that come out of them. In terms of vision, well, basic idea is to get the data centers as a solid foundation for Earthcube. And there was actually a good bit of discussion about what was a data facility. How do we call something a data facility? And there was a discussion of whether it should be ISO 16363 The Chronopolis Preservation Project that I'm involved with is TRAC certified, which is ISO certified, but we agreed that wasn't for everybody. It took about 2 years to do that. Mission and goals. This is probably one of the most important parts, and maybe the most relevant parts to the NDS effort here, because we talked about some of these things. What would the scope of the NDS be? Again, I won't read through all of these, but part of it is, and I'll be finishing up here. I'm timing myself even. Fostering innovation through collaborative projects as a foundation for Earthcube activities. Eventually, somebody's going to take one of these building blocks and throw it over the fence to one or more of the data centers, and they're going to say, put this in and see how it works. And we need to evaluate for scalability. Does it fit within the security requirements? We need to have tight communication among these groups, because we're kind of all we're designing and building and trying to adopt all in parallel for reasonable reasons. We define membership categories. At the top of the list are basically NSF Geo, not-for-profit funded data facilities. And then you can look over the other ones in there: FFRDCs, international, private, other things, and associate memberships. First three groups have voting rights, and we've outlined basically the governance process for this particular group. These are the signatures. This is an initial list from the people that were in the room working on this thing, building consensus on all of it. It has since grown, I think, quite a bit, and we need to update that particular thing. So lastly, NDS needs to leverage, and people have talked about it, existing CI and data centers, and try to mobilize those with shared services, except for all disciplines. Earthcube has to do the same thing, but our environment is constrained more to geo. The Earthcube Draft Charter for the CDF has a lot of parallels, I think, with what we've been talking about in the NDS, and that may serve useful as a model of something to look at as we try to form what we worked on in Joel's group in the governance area. And lastly, and I think we'll talk about this afternoon some, is a vision for success. One element of success is not reinventing the wheel, but forming productive alliances. I think there's potentially a good collaborative alliance between what's going on in Earthcube and what ideas are being presented inside of NDS. So that's all I have on that.
So let's thank all our speakers in this session.
Sorry, pulled it over.